Another important feature of TCP as a transport layer protocol in the TCP/IP networks is the provisioning of congestion control mechanisms. For that, we'll have to delve into first the principles of congestion control, which would determine the efficacy of any congestion control mechanism. For that, in this module, we shall first understand what is congestion, what is the effect of buffer or memory availability at the intermediate routers, and we look at possible combat strategies to manage such congestion. The references that I have chosen for providing insight into the principles is the RFC 2914, that is Congestion Control Principles, and again the book by Kuros and Ross. What is congestion? Congestion is an undesirable state of a network when there are too many sources which are sending too much data that the network can handle, and they're sending this data at a very high rate. So consequently, something bad is going to happen to the network. It would be determined and observed either through loss of packets, that is going to happen when the intermediate buffers of all the routers or some are going to overflow, or the packets in transit experience unusually long delays. So these two undesirable phenomena herald the existence of congestion. Let's look at a scenario in which first we assume that the intermediate routers do not suffer from buffer shortage. Instead, there is infinite buffer availability on the intermediate routers. So what do we expect? Let's say host A and B send to their respective destinations host C and D. If there is unlimited buffer available at the intermediate routers, so are we expecting packet loss? The packets would not be lost, but the packets, especially arriving at the tail end, are going to suffer from an excessively long delay. So for the sake of visualization, you can see here that in this figure, you are shown the arrival of packets as lambda in and the departure of packets as lambda out. Since the total number of packets in the overall network cannot exceed the total capacity, so we expect that as long as congestion is not approached, whatever is being sent into the network would linearly come out of the network, and we'd see a beautiful relationship between input and output. But if the packets are being sent at a very high rate, and since the packets are not getting lost, so we expect that the overall number of packets which are going to be in the network are going to increase, mainly owing to the total number of packets which are being buffered at the intermediate routers. So we'll see that as more packets come in, the packets at the tail end are going to experience more delays. Now, if we look at a more practical assumption, we'll have to consider that the intermediate routers cannot have infinite buffer. So with finite buffer, the notion of packet loss is going to come now, because as the packets which arrive at the tail end do not find any storage or buffer to reside, they would be discarded by the receiving router. Let's assume that we have again the same scenario where we have hosts A and B sending to the respective destinations, but with finite buffer now. If the arrival rate of the original transmissions is lambda in complement, and now the packets are being lost as well, so the packets which arrive as a consequence of packet loss would be retransmissions. So lambda in complement is now the arrival including the original transmissions plus the retransmissions. So naturally we expect lambda in complement to be a greater number as compared to lambda in. So now what do we expect here? In the first scenario, on the left hand side, we see that this graph shows that as long as lambda in complement does not violate the overall capacity of the network, a linear relationship can still be established between the original packets, some packets getting lost, some being retransmitted, and the output as lambda out. But if the arrival of the packets because of retransmissions is owing to the packet loss at the intermediate buffer and lesser because of any other reason, we'll see that the total number of transmissions now exceedingly become more than the output of the network. So input is increasing, but the output correspondingly is not increasing. So we are going to see the tapering off of the previously linear relationship. How can we handle it? We can handle it by assuming that the network has limited output capacity. So for given input, which includes original plus retransmissions, we still can have a departure which is linear by assuming that the overall network capacity is low. So we see here that a linear relationship is held for as long as our expectations become low. How can we combat this situation? We can handle congestion by looking at the network from an end-to-end perspective or from an intermediate network-centric perspective. The end-to-end congestion control, that is the implementation strategy behind TCP, there is no live feedback from the network. Instead, the end hosts communicate with each other and assess the overall health of the network. The congestion is inferred from end systems observed through loss and delay, as just stated. And this is the way how TCP does it. On the contrary, if the network now starts playing a proactive and participatory role in congestion combating, the intermediate devices comprising routers must now provide feedback to end systems. How will they do that? They would implement some kind of flagging or bit setting mechanism, such as the TCP/IP explicit congestion notification and the ATM explicit forward congestion notification bits. So this is going to determine the intermediate network is suffering from congestion, and it will notify the sender and the receiver through these encoded bits.